Here at The Regenerative Journey, we know that good health is related to good food and good practices, but understand that sometimes the right food choices are quite hard to put into place. But our good buddy, Cindy O'Meara at the Nutrition Academy, is helping people break old habits to create a much healthier lifestyle. So in support of what she's doing, we're offering a $100 discount to all our listeners. Simply enrol in their functional nutrition course and enter the coupon Charlie100, that's Charlie100. The Nutrition Academy, say goodbye to old food habits and hello to a much healthier, happier life.
I then learned how all of us were treating pigs and poultry, especially by confining them in massive sheds and making them eat, sleep in their own shit. And I was like, what? We do what to get that bologna on my sandwich?
That was Tammi Jonas, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host, Charlie Arnott. Don't forget our spring Intro to Biodynamics workshops are coming up fast. We are at Hanamino in Boorowa in New South Wales on the 7th and 8th of October, then travel to Victoria in mid-October, Tasmania in late October, with our last workshop for the year in the beautiful Margaret River in WA during late November. All are welcome, urban gardeners, broadacre farmers, graziers, viticulturists alike. No previous experience required, as Hamish and Charlie cover it all. For more details, check out our website www.charliearnott.com.au and follow the events link.
G'day, this week's episode is with Tammi Jonas of Jonai Farms down in Daylesford in Victoria. I caught up with Tammi some months ago now and I had been to her farm before. I'd met Stuart and her good self and we had a lovely quick tour around the farm. She's such a font of information and so open and honest. We talked about her her moving from city life to the country, what motivated her, how she met Stuart, her whole regenerative journey as per the episode is supposed to be doing. And we did that with spades, with bells on, in spades. Here you go, Tammi Jonas. If you don't know much about Tammi, you're going to know a whole lot more about her in a minute. I hope you enjoy this interview with Tammi Jonas as much as I did on the regenerative journey. Welcome to your Belvedere. Is that right? Is that what you call it?
Shouldn't I welcome you to my Belvedere?
No, this is the thing I do. I welcome my guests to pretty much their own house, or their. Sometimes when I introduce them, when I interview them at Hanamino, my house, I have to welcome them in. That's a proper welcome. But I just like to welcome them to their own little part of the world.
Yes, and I'd like to acknowledge that our own little part of the world is on the unceded lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So welcome.
Well, I am honoured to be here, Tammi. You've been on my list for some time and then it occurred to me this morning, because I think I sent a text.
You did.
I was not far away. Oh my God, they're just around the corner, because my travel plans changed a bit. And it was 5 or 6 years ago since I've been here. Lots happened. We've been for a wonderful little tour of pigs, the veggie garden, the greenhouse, the little the farm. What do you call the
bunny
boys?
room?
The villa,
room. Farmhands villa.
Yeah, we've just it's a lot of stuff that's happened, and pretty much all at the hands of your wonderful partner, Stuart.
He's an amazing builder. He's a genius.
He is. We won't be talking to him today. Maybe I'll talk to him some other time.
He's usually off comms.
So you can see the people on the video machine, on the YouTube thing, behind us. So this is called the Belvedere, and Stuart built it.
And that's because I said to him, build me a shed made entirely of windows. And he said, oh, sure, I'll build you a gazebo. And I'm like, I don't want a gazebo. So I looked in my friend the thesaurus, and I found that a belvedere is a structure architecturally designed to capture beautiful views. Belvedere.
Ah, nice one.
That's
beautiful
why it's the belvedere.
View. Yeah, we won't be calling it the gazebo, will we?
Nope.
Not in this part of the world. No, we're near Dalesford, aren't we? So they don't have gazebos.
No
here.
gazebos here.
No, how rude. So, Tammi, welcome to the show. As the Galahs serenade us, can you? This show is about the regenerative journeys of my interviewees, of which I know some of yours, but I want to share that with our listeners. Before we start at day one of your regenerative journey, which starts before epiphanies and tension events and turning points, pretty much the day you're born. We can go back that far if you want. I want you to just describe, explain, set the scene for our listeners of where we are, what we're looking at, and why that might be important to you.
Of right here.
Right here, right now.
Yeah. So we are sitting...
As Fat Boy Slim said so eloquently years ago.
Right here, right now. We are sitting in my very beautiful belvedere, as you and I just discussed, which Stuart built so that we could be enclosed from the elements on this beautiful property while still taking in all of its beauty. And those birds aren't going anywhere.
No, I'm just thinking it's really windy out there, and
it is quite windy. We're very protected.
Yeah,
even
unreal.
with the big open door at the front, the prevailing wind comes out of the southwest, and so this is oriented away from that for that reason.
I don't need to put tea cozies on these things.
Shouldn't need to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
And
thank you for sparing me the need to do that.
And you're looking down across the western garden beds, which are for a mixture of just growing our own food and for growing a commercial crop of garlic, a very small commercial crop, which came from us having a butcher shop on the farm and then having excess bones and trying to figure out what to do with extra bones. So we decided to start making bone char. So Stuart built a retort. And after building the retort to pyrolyze the bones, to make the bone char, that led us down the path of finding out more about biofertilizers. And so with waste, whey, molasses, and the cow manure from our cattle, we then add the bone char to activate it. And then that all goes out onto these beautiful beds to grow the garlic. And then we extract a nutrient and feed it to people somewhere else. And then the garlic led us on the next part of the journey, which is I really like to ferment chili and garlic. But it's very hard to grow chilies in this climate in the Central Highlands. Very frosty. Our growing season's super short. So I kept asking for a greenhouse. And then we were inspired by an article I read about the old fruit walls of Europe, where they used to have the walls to the north to keep the fruit trees warm enough through winter. And then they glassed them in eventually, and they worked out, that kept them even warmer. And then humans, being the geniuses that they are, they took the wall away and left them all glass and then started heating them with fossil fuels.
Cool.
So we kind of destroyed that concept a couple hundred years ago. But
let's make it more challenging and more
and let's have
wasteful.
To heat something. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we were really inspired by those fruit walls and the glass over them. And then we were in Beijing and we saw in -30, they have concrete and then polytunnel. And they actually, just before sundown, while it's still warm, they roll thermal blankets over those polytunnels and they'll hold that heat over a freezing cold winter night. And they grow food all year up in these polytunnels. So I thought, keeping that thermal mass to the south here and extending our growing season through the whole year means we could keep chilies alive, if not fruiting. And then I can get a bigger chili harvest. Chili harvest.
You can try.
I don't think so. So now that's for growing my chili, so I can start fermenting the chilies from growing here rather than from all my friends' greenhouses.
Well, that's just all about self-sufficiency and resource recycling, reuse, repurpose.
Absolutely, which is fundamental to what we do at Jonai. Everything here is about using materials that other people think are now waste and repurposing them to continue their lives, either as the same thing or something else. And all of where we are at the moment, of course, is in the context of these 69 acres. And we've got the very steep volcano to our right.
Mount.
Eastern Hill.
We are so going to, I don't know, maybe we can have why does that go red then? Competition. Name that wonderful
To name
hill.
that hill.
Yeah.
I should find out its name from its original owners.
That would be more appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And it would have a name, I imagine, would it?
I think so, but it may not be known anymore because it's not as distinctive as something like Mount Franklin. So, yes, it doesn't have the beautiful trees on it.
It's volcanic, yeah?
It is volcanic, yeah. There's even a lava tube up there, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. You're living on a volcano.
Yeah, so I think also what you're doing, sitting here looking at all of this, we came wanting to grow more for ourselves as well as to be farmers who sold food to other people. And in the early years of establishing a commercial enterprise, we started out growing a lot of food, and then we grew less of our own except for the meat while we were in the big startup phase. And our gardens were really hard to keep on top of. And then in the last 3 years, as we've bedded down our systems, we've been able to return wholeheartedly to the enterprise of living more like peasants who actually are... We're not self-sufficient, but we're community sufficient. Between us and all of our local friends, we are able to provide our own food, and we feed, obviously, pork and beef and garlic to others. And then increasingly, as we grow more things for ourselves, we're thinking about where there's a little bit of surplus, we might be able to sell a little bit of that. Like right now, my horseradish over to our left is doing what horseradish does very well and colonizing those entire squares in front of the Belvedere. And I'm thinking very soon I'm going to be a horseradish farmer.
You already are. Just depends on
who has surplus to sell.
That's right. A commercial horseradish farmer.
Yeah.
How tall are that corn out there? That's is that 8-9 foot high? It
is. So that's actually an old maize variety. That's a Mexican one for masa, for making tortillas.
Cool.
So
did you get some
from a friend here in Australia? So
are we allowed to do this?
Last year I grew a polenta variety, and this year I'm growing this masa variety. And each year I'm going to alternate to try to get up to 2 years' supply of my own polenta and my own masa.
That's unreal. And tell us about the cereal out there, cereal crop.
Yeah, that was my first attempt at growing a grain. So we grew a heritage white wheat that I got from Jason at Toorong Farm down in the Mornington Peninsula. And I was so encouraged. I got 8.5 kilos of wheat.
How many kilos of wheat did you sow?
Less than a kilo, about 750 grams.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
That's unreal.
It's fiddly to thresh and winnow, but it's not hard. No, and I'm pretty excited about doing 6 rows this year. And we're going to do a red wheat, a white wheat, and a triticale.
Unreal. And then you're going to make some flour from that?
Yes, so I have a mill. Bread. I've been milling my own flour already, and we make all our own bread. What's
the brand of mill you use, just out of curio? Is it the one that sounds like a rude word?
Yeah, that Swedish one that everyone has.
Starts with F?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I've got one of them.
Yeah.
Because only the one.
Ours is the family one.
Yeah. I've got the bachelor one. So Tammi, let's proceed to not pull apart, that's probably the wrong word, dig into, that wind's picking up too, isn't it? Rain's on the way. Dig into your regenerative journey, because there's a lot to it, and you've just given us a hint of where you are at this point in time, geographically, but also your philosophy. I want to take it back when maybe there was a time when that wasn't your philosophy, or you were, it was embryotic, as it were. How far back do you want to go?
Well, that would be, I was raised by the most delightful conservative rednecks you could ever meet. I adore them. I'm so grateful for the upbringing.
Conservative redneck? Can you say that? Is that something you can put like conservative redneck, or conservative in the redneck context of redneck?
They're conservatives.
Yes.
And they're rednecks.
Yeah, right. What state was that? Oh, totally.
Mum's from Oregon and my dad's from Alabama.
Yeah, right.
And I was raised in Oregon and California.
Yep.
And my dad was in the Marines, and then he was a cop in LA and San Diego, and then they started their own business in manufacturing and selling outdoor electrical signs. So I'm a sign maker's daughter.
Good for you. In California?
They did that in California, yeah. Cool. And then I was born in San Diego, and then I was in primary school in LA, and then high school in Oregon, in a very conservative logging town.
Wow.
And so I grew up not questioning the politics I was surrounded by, and thinking, nobody in my family is explicitly racist or anything awful, but they're in a very white bread town, and fiscally and socially conservative.
Yeah.
And so when I went off to uni and I was back in San Diego, I was exposed to a whole bunch of leftists, radicals at university. And I, at first, was just like, what is it with these hippies, right? But I was secretly kind of attracted to the whole thing. It seemed kind of appealing. And then I went to a talk just before the first Gulf War started in 91. And I went to a talk where I heard a number of people in a row talk about all of America's foreign policy in Central America and in the Middle East, and how our government had contributed to the deaths and starvation of people all over the world. And I'd never heard those stories. I didn't know any of that history of America. That's how kind of sheltered I was.
Is that because it just wasn't in the school classroom? That's just not what you talked about?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Especially not in a conservative town, right?
Yeah.
Nobody thought or knew those things.
Yeah, right.
America's number one.
Yeah,
that's the kind of town I came from.
Yeah, cool.
And I heard these people talk, and I couldn't believe I didn't know all these things. And so that set me on a journey to find out more.
Did that challenge, did you go, that's an affront to my current worldview or paradigms, or did you just go, oh my God, this is actually, you were drawn to it immediately?
I was drawn to it immediately.
Okay, so there was no pushback, that's crap, and then weaned yourself on the idea. There was just this is filling a void or something.
I think one thing, and it's something Stuart and I share, we're intensely curious people. So when I'm presented with new information, my immediate response to it is not, that can't possibly be true. Oh, God, having said that, I've certainly heard myself say that. That can't be true.
You sound like an Aussie then.
Well, I've been here nearly 30 years.
I know that. You've still got that accent, which is lovely, and but I love it when I like it when people are clearly been Australianised. When you say that, it's like...
For better or for worse?
No, for better, I reckon. How rude. I take that back.
So, what was I saying about the...
Oh, yeah, that can't be right.
being curious, though. So I think
cool.
It's one of the things I credit my parents with as well. Like, they really encouraged us to have questioning minds and to... try to make the world better than you found it, even if their way of doing that turned out to be different to mine. And I think, so finding out, there's a whole bunch of things I didn't know, it just set me on the path of, well, then I need to find out more, including whether these things are true,
Yeah.
And, that, of course, then you start hanging out with hippies. And the next thing you know, you're eating whole food. And so my journey into the food space literally comes from the political awakening.
Yeah.
And I instigated a fast in solidarity with the people of Kuwait. And it's interesting, I don't know why that was my go-to protest idea, because I was raised on entirely industrial food. It wasn't like our family wasn't centered around food. We had very kind of erratic eating habits. And yet I immediately thought, these people are having their access to food cut off. That's not fair. Let's fast in solidarity with them to show how wrong that is.
And what year is that?
It's in 91.
91. Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, so it's January 91 when that's happening. And then the war starts.
Is that first year of your uni?
No, it's the third year of my uni.
Okay, so it wasn't say you got to uni and within minutes you were fasting.
No.
It wasn't that quick.
No, the awakening was slow, I guess, because I was being exposed to these friends who'd gone to really good schools in all over the country, and they were already feeding me kind of small bits of information about the way the rest of the world was. But it was slow. I was probably still a little bit resistant to their little interventions in my life, but it was hearing a bunch of experts detail America's war crimes that made me go, okay, I need to go find out more.
And the war started that year, you were saying?
Yeah, it started in January and it went for about 2.5 months. Yeah. So we organised a sleep-in and we slept on the library steps at my university for that whole 2.5 months. And we would have Thursday night vigils.
It's cold, wasn't it? January?
I mean, it's San Diego. When it's cold, you have to put a jumper on with your shorts.
It's not too bad. You're not like in, I don't know, Chicago or somewhere.
No, I had to put socks on with my Birkenstocks.
Get out of here. Socks and sandies. Cool.
It's a true story.
But that's very hippie though.
Oh. I was a total hippie. I was so into tie-dye and I was a total hippie.
And that's all. Nothing else.
That obviously hasn't changed. So I just,
I'm not used to you not having a hat on.
I know. Well, I wear it for butchery, and then I wear it when I'm off.
No, but you wear a hat often, don't you?
I do, but since COVID, I never leave here.
Or maybe that's more photos of Sunny. You've got the hat on. That's
you
great.
have to wear a hat in the boning room.
Yeah, the little
Army hat.
Little army hat. Yeah, is that not COVID safe? Crim safe? No, what are they called?
Prime safe.
Prime safe.
Yes, Crim safe isn't wrong. Yes, it is. We are required to wear head coverings. Even if you're bald, you have to wear a head covering.
Is that right? In case any little
not a beard
whiskers.
covering.
Not a beard. Oh no, beards are fine. Are you serious? Man, I shed like a dog.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot.
But I wouldn't have to. It could end up in salami. But if I'm bald, I've got to wear something that there is no hair on.
Yes. Those are the rules.
That's sensible. Well, I want to get back to that one. So that whole thing, university, curious, on a particular journey, on a path, as it were. What was next? Where did that lead you? Because food is clearly a sort of we call it a principle, but one of your it's a cornerstone of what you do, I imagine, in terms of production and the advocacy of good localised food without spoiling it for everyone. When did that become more of a thing? Was that the university? Was that post-university? What happened?
I guess again, hanging out with hippies, I became a vegetarian because then I read Peter Singer's Animal Liberation.
Okay.
And I learned, so I'd not only just learned how our government treats other countries, I then learned how all of us were treating pigs and poultry especially by confining them in massive sheds and making them eat, sleep in their own shit. And I was like, what? We do what to get that bologna on my sandwich? And so my instant reaction, because I didn't know how to avoid it, was to simply become a vegetarian. And that was interesting when I stopped being vegetarian to realize that by opting out of eating meat, I actually got to learn less about it. I had no need to navigate the world of meat. So I just didn't interact with it at all. Of course, then I had to learn that I was being hypocritical about dairy and eggs and try to find free-range things. So this became a kind of very personal concern, whereas the politics around the military interventions was a very kind of, communally minded activist. So these are all happening at the same time. I'm having my personal development around food, and I'm having my political development around the military. And then I cracked the shits by the end of third year. With the war ended, but did it. And then I couldn't stand what I saw as the hypocrisy of the academy. Everybody who didn't want us marching through their classrooms because they're here to be the doctors of tomorrow. They're going to save us all tomorrow. And I thought, you bastards, what about today? This is actually real and happening now. Why aren't you doing anything? So I tried to quit entirely, but the university...
Quit the course?
Yeah, I tried to drop out entirely, but a counsellor convinced me to just withdraw until I wanted to come back. Yeah, defer. Yeah. Which is very wise. I mean, I was like 20, right? So I wasn't as wise as that guy.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
So I withdrew and I went on a one-way ticket to London, which is where I met Stuart. And like by the third or fourth day, I met him in a hostel. And he was... in this hostel, he was cooking. I could see him through the kitchen. I was actually watching American football with some other travelers I'd met. And I saw this big flop-topped kind of giant guy in there, and he was cooking. And I'm like, whoa, he's cooking in a hostel. That's cool. And I didn't know what nationality he was or anything. And then he comes and he sits down, and I was so impressed. And we laugh endlessly still about this because he was literally cooking 2-minute noodles. He was cooking top ramen. But in
Did he turn up with his tea and you went, oh, I'm not so impressed?
No, I didn't at all. I still thought it was a terribly resourceful because I was just going out and buying food, right?
Yeah, okay, cool. This guy is he's a step above, man. You were crushing on him.
I was. Yeah, cool. I was. We're celebrating 30 years since that event in July.
Wow, that's cool.
And appropriately going to spend it on the road, doing some agroecology schools up the East Coast and seeing farmers and focusing around food, as always.
Eating noodles.
Yeah. No.
Come on, you've got to have like a token packet.
Nope.
Good. That was a test. Thank you. Good right answer. So crushing on Stuart in the hostel, Inseparable? What happened then?
Yeah, from day one. So we travelled for 4.5 months together in Europe.
Yeah.
And
what was he doing there, apart from eating noodles in a...
he was like every Australian. He'd gone with a backpack and a suitcase. He was going to spend a year in London. He was going to look for work. He'd also withdrawn from uni for a year to go do that. And then he met me, and we had to drag his suitcase to his auntie and uncle's in Herefordshire and leave it there so that he could actually be a backpacker, not some guy in a hostel in London. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, we travelled around just exploring and goofing off, really. And it's funny when we think back, because we mostly, like most backpackers when you're that age, mostly hit all the capital cities. And now if we go to Europe, like, you can't pay us to spend time in the cities. We're all about, the countryside and landing somewhere in a cabin. Yep. So it's that youthful rite of passage where the cities seem where the meaning is. And later you find out that actually there's no meaning to be found there.
It's in between.
It is. So then he followed me back to America, and I went back to my degree.
You didn't ask him to come back. He just followed you.
Oh, he totally
What are you doing here? Hey, get off this plane. Why are you on the same plane?
Kind of like that. Well, we started, actually, it's interesting, because when we left London, he said to me, so where are you going to go next? And I was like, well, I was thinking of going to Bath. I've heard that you should go and take the waters at Bath. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I was going to do it. And I said, what are you going to do? And he goes, I might just go along with you. I was like, oh, yeah, cool. We were both very cool about it. And we were going to we both had planned to hitchhike through the UK. And so for me, he was security as well. And for him, I was his ride, because he was going to pick up a guy who's 6'4".
That's right.
With a suitcase as well as a backpack, especially.
Yeah. No one. He's going, you're the ticket out of here, around here.
Yeah.
That was mutually beneficial. That's good.
Yep.
That's what good partnerships are based on. And then what happened?
So I identify that too as that trip to Europe on a one-way ticket was me leaving America. Like, I was so fed up with the place and its politics and its damage around the world. And then Stuart became my ticket to not have to return. So I went back to finish my degree, but was very much then on the migratory pattern to Australia. Like, I was madly in love with him, and I didn't really know I was going to settle in Australia right when he first came back to America, but I think it's what I wanted all along. I wanted to not have a reason to go back and live in the States, and I'd found it in the love of my life. And so I finished the degree, and I came back here to live with him I first came in 92, and I settled here in 93.
Was he a vegetarian?
No.
I was going to say
sometimes under duress, but he didn't really want to be.
A lot of guys do that.
He did get to a point, I have to say, because I was a vegetarian off and on for a decade, and he wouldn't eat meat in our house. And then there's that weird thing, though, you eat when you're out and you have less control over what it is. And as we both got more knowledgeable, he ate less and less.
Yeah, right. And then we might get to that point where you stop being the on and off vegetarian and you changed your mind on things.
Yeah, well, when I came back to eating meat, it was because I'd had 2 very successful vegetarian pregnancies where I was only borderline anemic. And then the third one, by the 3rd month with Atticus, I was so anemic that nothing would fix it that wasn't meat. And I was actually on my way to work one day in the 3rd month, and I just thought, I was at work, and I thought, a hamburger would fix this? I think I just had this image of really bloody red meat. And I thought, that's what my body just craved. And I literally went down to the little independent burger shop in Smith Street and ordered a burger. And I think the guy thought I was a lunatic the way I was ordering, very tentatively, do you have burgers?
Do they have meat in them?
And he's like, do you want sauce? And I'm like, no. Do you have hot English mustard? And I had a burger and I never looked back. So I went back to eating.
And it was yummy.
It was delicious. And I felt better immediately. So I would have red meat once or twice a week throughout that pregnancy. Yeah. And then I went back to a little bit of fish as well. It was another couple of years before I had any pork or poultry until I could find some from a farm with a name and a story and actual animals outside.
So it wasn't just the fact of eating meat, it was also where it was from, how it was produced, more than just I need animal protein in my body.
Yeah. Even though I was going back to getting the iron in particular is what it needed, the bioavailable iron. Even though it was about that, it had to be from animals I was comfortable eating. And I knew that cattle and sheep are, by and large, well raised in this country. Yeah. And there was less feedlotting than there is now. And so I was prepared to eat it with less information. And I wasn't prepared to eat pork and poultry until I had more information.
So you were in the city then?
Yeah, we were in Melbourne.
In Melbourne, yeah. And your vocation at the time?
Well, that particular time I was actually a receptionist. While I was pregnant with Atticus, I'd gone back to work for 4 days a week for us to get some more money in the bank before we had baby number 3 and went back to a sole income family. I'd been a high school teacher before Oscar was born, the eldest. And then my career was very much being a stay-at-home mum. I was completely devoted to that career as soon as Oscar was born. And then I was studying part-time and mothering full-time. And I just did that stint of reception, actually at the place where Stuart was working. They hired me for 6 months.
Oh, he was already working there?
I worked there up until 3 days before Atticus was born, actually.
And at what point did you think, well, maybe I don't want to be doing this in the city, whatever that might have been at the time, but being a stay-at-home mum, that I imagine that limits you to your experiences outside of, I've got 3 kids to look after, and Stuart's doing his job.
Yeah.
What was the impetus to upheave your life and go somewhere? And did you know where you wanted to go?
So I think it started kind of slowly. We definitely would go away a lot for camping or weekends in the country with friends or just on our own. We just really loved being out of the city. And over the years, that feeling of dread on the way back into the city, we acknowledged it at some point and went, we don't feel good going home. We feel good going out. We want to reverse that situation. So we started probably in the mid-2000s. We started vaguely looking for properties, but we didn't have any plan. We had very citified jobs and skill sets, or it seemed. And so we weren't sure how we would move out. We talked about being self-sufficient dropouts. Neither of us are particularly good at being dropouts. So that didn't seem that appealing. Also, how do you even do that? How do you have a mortgage and drop out? So it just didn't seem very realistic. And, our very young hippie ideas of being a little permaculture property somewhere, it's like, sure, but how do you pay for the property? And so we'd go looking and we'd get excited. We'd find and Daylesford was one of the first places we came. So the mid-90s, we started coming up here for Nordic weekends, basically. And we loved this area. It was the most, for me in Victoria, it felt the most like Oregon without being too far from the city.
And for those who aren't familiar with Daylesford, it's an hour out of Melbourne?
Yeah, we're just an hour out of Melbourne.
Yeah, so it's actually remarkable that it's so close from the CBD.
While still being a properly rural area.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it's rolling hills. I mean, it's not the kind of height of the mountains that I grew up with, and obviously the trees are all wrong. But
all wrong.
I mean, no,
the trees
they're
right.
beautiful, but they're just a very strange colour of green compared with what I grew up with. So yeah, we'd been coming up here, and we thought we probably wanted to move up here. We said the first time we came here in '96, we wrote it in the Convent Gallery's guest book that we would be back to live. But it took us, 15 years from when we said that till it actually happened. And then we were visiting, we were staying at Crookwell, in New South Wales.
It's only an hour from Burrawa.
Yeah, so not actually Crookwell, the...
Lagan, Taralga.
No, tiny little hamlet that our cousin had a property at.
Gunning,
about
Dalton, Rugby, Rye Park, Tutter's Flat, Bigger.
I can't remember. They always refer to it as Crookwell, even though the hamlet's got a different name.
I'm trying to think. Yeah,
we went up there for New Year's, and it was before that trip. It was the trip before that. So we went up there for a visit, and we just had the loveliest time helping them in the garden, taking long walks on the hills. And we said then, no, we have to get serious about this property search because neither of us wants to go back to the city. What are we going to do? So then we started looking seriously, but we still didn't have a plan. And then it's the next year when we've looked at heaps of properties that we heard Joel Salatin speak in Daylesford.
And that was all, and where you're looking at properties was still Victoria, still Melbourne, out of Melbourne.
Then it was entirely up here, actually. And then it was after we heard Joel speak one of his You Can Farm seminars. And by the end of that, I was hitting Stuart on the side of the leg and going, we're going to be farmers. That's how we're going to move to the country. Why didn't we think of this? And he's like, because apparently you can't make any money farming. I'm like, but Joel just said you can.
He just said you can farm.
So we're going to farm pigs because they're all farmed wrong. And there need to be more free-range pigs. So we're going to go help with that. And he's like, okay.
Did he have any farming experience?
No, he's city born and bred. Yeah. He's as you've seen, he's a very industrious
very
person. He was always a frustrated farmer in the city, I reckon.
So just on that one, before we actually land on here, the farm, I'm interested to just quickly dig into were you wanting to get away from the city because it was something, it was like, I'm using the word pain, not necessarily pain, but was it something you were trying to get away from or something you were trying to get to? Like, what was the bigger driver? Just to go, city, no, anywhere else is better, or
that's
city,
a great
okay,
question.
but country is like, or Dalesford is like, that's the draw, and it just happens I've got to leave the city to get there.
I reckon it was probably, I wanted to go to the country because I'm from the country, and I wanted my horizons back. And I think Stuart wanted to get out of the city. He hated his office job, and he really wanted to be able to do projects all the time and be outside all the time. So for him, it was also a 2, but there was definitely a stronger element of wanting to get away from his urban past and present. And for me, it was like, I understand horizons and pickup trucks. Let's go. That's what I want to do. I want to not have to put on the right clothes to go down to the shops. I want to have a bigger garden. I want to, all of those things. I want my children to be raised where they can run free, pack a lunch and disappear up the hill for the day.
Breathe their biome.
Yeah.
So tell me, when did you find here? Like, what was it? Was it split off from another farm? Was it as it is? Like, what was the?
No, this was the size of it. We were looking up here, but we decided Stuart's parents really pressed us to make sure we were choosing the right region, even though for like 15 years we thought we wanted to live here. So just due diligence, we went and looked at South Gippsland, and we looked in the Otways, and we actually went down to Tassie and did a bit of an excursion as well. And we adore Tassie. Like, actually, I think we both would have happily chosen something there. But the one extra flight from the US, and also I was doing a lot of travel for the work that I was doing, so the extra flight and also the smaller market, we weren't sure with all of this thing we were starting whether that was going to be a problem.
That was how long ago?
Like 11 years ago when we were doing this.
A lot's happened in Tassie in 11 years, hasn't it?
A lot has. And we could have been part of that revolution there, and it would have been fine, but I still am happy we didn't go the extra distance from what for me is a trip back to the States to see the family. So we settled pretty quickly on this region after doing that bit of due diligence. And we actually looked at the place across the road, which is 60 acres. And we had our heart set on it, and we were lowballing it. And it was all because of the beauty of the northerly views from the house that was put there from Brunswick. And other than that, the place, all 60 acres are in one paddock with bad boundary fences, one leaky dam, and basically no topsoil.
It's quite open there, isn't it?
It's very open and windswept. And our road is a seasonal creek.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of these beautiful volcanic soils, they hit that gully and they just go down. They don't go over there. Yeah. There's just nothing on that escarpment sort of there.
Yeah.
And we came and looked at this house, which has a southerly aspect, and the elderly woman who was living here always had the curtains all closed, and there were cypresses everywhere. And so the place felt very dark and enclosed and wrong aspect. Meanwhile, it had multiple paddocks with really good fencing. It had 5 dams. It had this giant shed. It was actually what we needed. But mind you, the hill presents its own challenges, the volcano, because it's so steep. But we just couldn't quite see it until the 3rd visit. We came back on, and also she dropped the price between the 2nd and 3rd visit, so there's that.
That sometimes helps.
By a lot, because she moved from having
we'll
Dalesford estate agents to having her from her last farm up at Kyabram, and they just put a totally different price on it.
Yeah.
And so we came back that 3rd time, and I think it was a sunnier day too, and we finally saw what we were looking for, and here it was, and it was just actually perfect.
You had your imagination hats on that day.
And we'd stopped wearing our urban requirement just for a view from the kitchen window. I still had that. That was still a requirement. But I was understanding the importance of water security and a bit more infrastructure on the farm. And good soils.
Yeah. And so signed, sealed, delivered, turn up. What next?
Via the US, we spent 4.5 months. We packed all our stuff in the container that's now our bedroom, left it here for 4.5 months, and drove from DC to Oregon in a 1977 GMC motorhome and visited a whole bunch of small-scale farms along the way.
So you went there first?
Yeah, we did. We dropped our stuff here and then went and did our farm tour.
So that's quite serious. That's quite a that was quite using your foresight to go, okay, in preparation, because I imagine a lot of people would have gone, my God, this is a new farm, let's just get here and do stuff, as opposed to, whoa, no, let's just do some research first. I can't imagine many people do that.
Probably some of them do the research before they buy the property.
But they certainly wouldn't have gone to the States and done the...
No, and it was great. We met some amazing farmers over there.
Anyway, so that sort of was the impetus.
I got to have the time with the family. And I mean, we drove across America in a heat wave in a terrarium on wheels. I don't actually necessarily recommend the way we did that, but we did learn a lot. And we got to, so much. When you sleep in a terrarium, you know. Yes.
Did you go to Joel's farm?
We did. Yeah, we started over there. And I mean, that was amazing because it was everything that he'd said it was. You know, it was a good test of the bullshit meter. You know, we got to see the movement of the animals and the diversity of the grasses, and it was great. We were only there like for the day. You know, he didn't know us from a bar of soap, but he lets anyone come to the farm, so we went and did that.
Did you say, "Hi, we saw you at Dalesford"? And
100%, yeah.
And like just tugging at his elbow. Hey,
yeah, Joel. And like got a photo and stuff with the kids.
That's cool. That's great.
And got Atticus the lunatic farmer T-shirt and a future lunatic farmer T-shirt. So,
yeah, cool.
And we visited some other farms. Actually, just randomly contacted them and said, "Could we come and see what you're doing?" And there was this beautiful farm, Bluebird Farm in North Carolina. Bluebird Farm. Yeah, and they were a whole diet CSA, and they were like in their early 20s. And they were working themselves to death. And we thought, you two, we're never going to do a whole diet CSA.
And when you say a whole diet CSA, like they're doing as much of like everything.
Sheep, pigs, pastured poultry, egg for meat and eggs, and a market garden.
Yeah, veggies.
So all the veggies. They had some fruit. They didn't have dairy.
Yeah, right.
But like it was intense.
Wheat? Did they have wheat? Were they growing wheat?
No, they were not growing wheat. No, and look, they're still going and we're still friends. We visited them again like in 2017 and it was really nice to see the development of their enterprise as well. Are they
still running madly around? Or
no, they've got some family members involved in it now, so they've spread their workload a bit more and also they're just like all of us. They're better at it than when we saw them, and no, they're not working themselves to death. And we still talk food politics and farming things online together. Yeah.
So did the tour... gathered the information, I guess the theory in some ways.
Some of, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess the principles and because there's only so much you can take with you, I guess.
Yeah.
Arrived back in Australia, excited.
Very. Stopped at Bunnings on the way to buy a new wheelbarrow strapped to the roof of our Volvo, drove up here.
Stuart still got that?
Yeah, we've still got it. Yeah,
I bet
it's the green one. Yep.
Yes.
Yep, we do.
He's turned into an outdoor bath.
No, it's still going, amazingly. And then we landed here and, I mean, for the first year, we were just basically homesteaders. I would not recommend doing it the way we did. We didn't start building all the fences. We got pigs and we got cattle in the first year, but we kind of built everything a step behind all the animals instead of a step ahead of them, because in those days we would climb the volcano for the views, not to check the fences.
Oh, okay.
You know?
So the animals turned up. You went, oh, here we go. We've got land. You just do what you need to do.
Kind of. I mean, the pigs, obviously, we managed a little bit more than that, but perhaps not as much as... I mean, we should have been building fences out where the pig paddocks are like crazy, and we weren't. So... we did get some fences in, obviously, before we moved. They started right here where we're sitting, actually. They dug our first veggie garden, which was here where the Belvedere is. And then it was like, well, they've used up this space. There were 5 of them. They've used this up. What do we do now? I guess we move them over there.
To the next bit.
Yeah, we didn't have a very good plan.
But I guess as we were talking, we went for a wander there before, until you actually, dare I say, experiment or try it or put them there and put a fence up here and see how they go, there's no textbook, is there? No, and actually the sort of textbook we did look at, which was meant to be best practice free-range farming in the UK, talks about that hub and spoke model. Like the wagon wheel. And that's how we built the original paddocks out there with a central section, and then you would feed from there to the wagon wheel spokes. And that's terrible. That's very human-centered design and not very land-centered design because it puts all the impact in the one spot. And being a very wet winter area, that's a disaster for our land. So did you try that? That's how you started? That's how the first paddocks were built. And we very quickly saw that was a bad land management strategy. And so I had tried to convince Stuart to build the fences low enough that we'd be able to step over them easily anywhere. And he was convinced that they would rust out if they were to the ground very quickly. So we didn't build them short enough. And so the next year we folded the top of all of them, went around and folded all the top ring lock down so that you could step over them because we feed out all along the fences. We don't come in one gate in any paddock so that we can spread that nutrient around and spread the pig impact around. And the pigs being at sort of nose level, I guess that wire, is it a hot wire? There's a hot wire just on the inside. That's right, netting, that's right. I saw the netting and the hot wire just on the inside. Yep, that's right. Yeah. So it has to be low enough so you can step over the ring lock and the hot wire. So, yes, that design was dumb and we did not replicate it in the next two sets of paddocks at all. And now we're actually about to get one more road cut to make a circle instead of having just the fork. So you'll be able to do a complete circuit. And that will divide the last of the bigger paddocks down to smaller as well. It's interesting that wagon wheel design was based in the UK. The UK is not a dry place. I know, but I think so much of this advice comes for what's good for the humans rather than their landscapes. Yeah, it's just making the workload easier for you. Yeah, and also design at the expense in a way. Like, that's a nice, it seems like a neat and tidy solution. Yeah, but it's not actually good for the land at all. No. So we don't have that anywhere, and now you have to climb over fences to feed everywhere, and the troughs are moved every single day.
Looking for more information to assist your regenerative journey? Come join Charlie and his guests around the kitchen table, an online community of supporters with exclusive access to the Regenerative Journey interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions, a chance to engage with other like-minded people and more. Go to www.charliearnott.com.au/the kitchen table, and we look forward to sharing a yarn with you. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
So, experiments. What did you learn? What some of the learnings at that time? Because I imagine it was a pretty uphill, learning curve.
I mean, it was pretty hectic. Steep. It was endless learning at that stage, right? I feel like, we learned things like if we always farrow our sows in pairs, and we learned that if one farrows a day or two before the other one, that one's piglets will suckle off the one that hasn't farrowed yet and take all their colostrum. And so good one. So we now separate them as soon as the first one's due to, just before. They're separated into paddocks next to each other, the farrowing paddocks, but they're not in the paddock together anymore. Cross-pollinate. No, that's right. Good. So things like that, because we had a litter where they didn't get the colostrum, they got arthritis, and most of them died, actually. Their joints swelled and they got really sick.
Didn't get the good stuff.
Nope. So that was there have been plenty of hard lessons, actually. Lower fences are good.
Stuart with your big long legs.
Yep, I know. Well, he still builds everything for his height, and then everyone else struggles. So I think the learning then was simply to be more proactive, to be ahead of things rather than just reacting to what we were seeing. Yep, that was probably the biggest lesson for us in those first couple of years. And so we got more, we definitely got more proactive about doing the research in advance, talking to more people in advance and saying, what would you have done here? And we now bring that into our producers' workshops where we say, we're here to help you make new mistakes because we're going to tell you about all of our old ones.
Let's talk about that. So that was, how long have you been doing them? Like, how many years of mistakes had you been making until you went, right, we're going to just...
The first Grow Your Ethics workshop was in the year after we built the boning room. So we were licensed from January 2014. And I think that first one must have been late 2014, I'm guessing. So we'd been doing it only 3 years, not very long. And it came about because after we built the boning room and because we crowdfunded it and it got a lot of media attention. And so everybody wanted to know, how did you do that? And how should we do that? And it got to where I just couldn't deal with the number of phone calls and visitors coming to just ask for advice. So I said, hey, how about we have everyone come on the same day?
Good, yeah.
And we take them through the story.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, we were like, this is just our story, but we're happy to share it, but we're not experts. We've been here 5 minutes, and then, I think now I can confidently say, not necessarily that we're experts, but we know a lot more. And we still will say, but your land will dictate how you do things, and your family structure and what your skill sets, like Stuart's and mine, are extremely different and very complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
So other couples will have something different going on for them.
So what, just on that one, because I think that's really important and not considered often at all, just seeing your dairy, your milking cow, your Jersey, just wondering, is she supposed to be there?
Clarabelle. Yeah. She's right where she's meant to be.
On a mission. She's coming over for a little chat. People when they get married, sometimes it can be just luck. I mean, you guys, you weren't even, when you guys got together and got serious about each other, you weren't thinking about farming then. It just so happens that when you got to be farmers, it was like, hey, you're actually really good at doing outside stuff. So what are your two skill sets? What makes this work so well?
Aside from the brains and brawn thing, obviously, I think the main thing is Stuart's skill set is very technical, engineering, building. He's a very technical problem solver, and you've seen that in the buildings around here. He's extraordinary, and he's very proactive about finding solutions. So if he doesn't know how to weld, he watches every YouTube on welding, and now he's a welder. So he's not going into formal institutional learning very often. He learns it from the internet mostly, and books, lots and lots, mostly old books. We both prefer pre-industrial kind of farming books from the 40s and 50s. And then mine is probably more in the, it just struck me. He's like the hard sciences and I'm the life sciences, right? He's the physical sciences.
He's the sort of engineering.
He is, and I'm the life. Like I'm the gardens, and I'm the one who deals with the animal nutrition and like learns everything about what they need and can see and respond to changes in their well-being. Also, as the butcher, I literally see the results of their diet in the carcasses. And so I get the constant feedback loop from seeing how they are. But yeah, I think and then I'm the one who is the communicator and talks with the public and thinks about how, if we're an agroecological farm, what does that mean to the economics of what we're doing as well as the ecology of what we're doing. So, I think I hadn't thought about that, but that's really, I've always known we have a complementary skill set, but me being more on the life side and him being more on the built side is probably the simplest way to explain the difference.
And they are very complementary, aren't they? And they're also obviously he is his expertise being the hard science. It has to integrate with, and the purpose of that is for the biological, the life science
completely.
So that's the purpose of those constructions.
I mean, his structures house all of this beautiful life, right?
Totally, totally.
Yep.
And if it wasn't for him doing that, then your life science expression couldn't happen.
Right. I literally wouldn't have shelter.
Yeah.
And someplace to grow a lot of not the gardens, but the greenhouse, or the fencing for all of the livestock to move around, the constant moving of water, like Stuart working out how to move water 100-meter hill up the volcano with an 80-year-old piston pump. And secondhand solar panels and a treadmill motor.
Yeah, that's cool. That's MacGyver.
Yeah, he's been called MacGyver a lot.
But the good news also is that he's into it. Like, he's not just like, oh no, she wants me to build a bloody greenhouse to put those silly tomatoes. You know what I mean? Or maybe he does say that.
No, he loves it.
No, that's it. So there's this complementary cooperation. It's not like this is a chore or a task. This is like steps towards a wonderful thing that you are both creating here, which you have. And it doesn't take a second when you get out of the car and look around and go, oh my God, there's abundance here. There's life. There's, you know, it has a sort of not a haphazard is the wrong word. It's got an organic's the wrong word too, but it's got that sort of natural feel to it that's not contrived, you know, but that's nature though, isn't it? Nature's not contrived.
Yeah, it's come from, you know, we've inhabited the space and then let the right things spring up or put them up where they belong. We didn't arrive and come up with a plan and put everything in one place immediately. And then, so there's nothing contrived about it. It's like, this is the perfect spot for the Belvedere because it's a commercial facility for us. You know, it's where we run workshops. And it was a nice big space, but it's far enough from the house to have a sense of being separate from our domestic sphere while close enough to be part of this life here. And then you realize that you have this beautiful expanse of gardens, which I can see from my bedroom window. So that makes me very happy. I'm surrounded by gardens on both sides of us. And then, of course, the greenhouse, it's perfect to put it there because with its concrete wall to the south, it provides a shelter also for this western garden bed. And then also for the Belvedere. So now there's less wind load on all of this. And the shiitakes are actually the shiitake logs are going to go around behind where there's no sun behind that shed.
Nice one.
So we have shiitake logs, but they're kind of living around the rainwater tank at the moment.
Have you done permaculture? Is there sort of...
We both started as kind of, we never did a PDC, but we started as enthusiasts who had the permaculture design manual, and all of our backyards in Melbourne were very kind of permaculture inspired. We had the herb spiral. We had the
got to have a herb
PVC chook tractors.
Was it a raised herb spiral? Or was it
no, it was raised.
You were like
I went the full thing.
Gold medal.
Yeah,
good for you.
I have moved a lot of rocks in my gardening life.
You got some big rocks up there as well. I've noticed. Where to now? Oh, should we talk? Well, so okay, hit us up with what. So,
I have to just say on that life sciences thing, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't want to sell Stuart short either because actually he is a tree whisperer.
Cool.
He's constantly germinating more trees and learning about how they did, what different scarification they need or whatever to be able to germinate more and more from it. He gets mostly indigenous species from around here for doing that activity. Or not necessarily indigenous, but like local, the oaks that are from local stock.
Does he, when he gets his oaks from acorns from trees, get the duff from the mother and collect that at the same time?
Yeah, he does.
Cool.
He actually went through a stage where he was just getting the acorns and germinating them in the pots and letting them go for a year and then putting them in and getting a really low success rate. And then, that's right, and then he learned that he was much better to put these straight into the ground with some of the biota that comes with them. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I'll have that with him one day. Big fan of oaks, and for me, their place, this landscape needs to be put into intensive care. You know, I have conversations with people sometimes about planting natives and, you know, versus exotics, and, you know, it's wrong to be putting exotics in because they weren't here, and, you know, who are we to sort of impose our whitey exotic sort of stuff on the landscape? But I guess, you know, it's there's no right or wrong about any of this, but my view is that you know, and I'm loving the fact that you have both. You know, that I'm similar. Like we put hundreds of thousands of natives in various methods and ways and areas and designs. And I'm such a big fan, and at the end of the day, a bigger fan of exotics because this land needs to be put in intensive care. This is a Peter Andrewsism.
Yeah.
And when something goes into intensive care, it needs every medical practice we can apply. Right. This is emergency. It's do or die in a way.
Yeah.
So willows in creeks, oaks in the landscape, leucaena, lucerne tree. Yeah, well, the same thing. Tagasasti, I'm not sure if that'll grow down here. But
we've got heaps of Tagasasti.
You have, up there?
Yeah,
cool. Elm, whatever, is there's repair plants. We were talking about that before, because they are cycling nutrients. They're wonderful windbreaks. They're not creating and producing phytochemicals and toxins that can, be challenging to the growth of grass and other plants. And and look, if we really took that whole native thing to the nth degree, we better step out of this landscape too.
Exactly.
With our cows and pigs and sheep.
It's something that we've thought a lot about, and I'm actually working on in my PhD too. And I take that the comment that Bruce Pascoe has made, white people aren't going anywhere, black people aren't going anywhere. What are we going to do about it? And I take that to all species, not just humans. And we are a very mixed kind of species across this continent now. So what are we going to do about it is the question. And I agree with you that intensive care is what's needed. And we've certainly been doing our part to care intensively for this land. And a lot of that is non-Indigenous plants, which will better support our non-Indigenous animals as well. Who in the thesis, I'm calling the pigs, because they're a rare breed. I'm calling them a counter-hegemonic exotic species. Counter-hegemonic. So hegemonic being like the norms of the ruling class.
Yeah.
And often, when we're not the elite, we often end up supporting those norms. We become complicit in them, even if we don't want to be. And so I'm saying that by choosing rare breeds instead of industrial breeds, we are countering the hegemony of our time, the hegemony of industrial breeds and seeds. And so everything here that you see is us trying to do our counter-hegemonic work. And that's why we have masa, not hybrid sweet corn. That's why we have all these heritage breeds of plants as well as animals. And that's our part of saying, okay, well, we are exotic and all of these things are exotic, but we're not going to be part of the colonial, industrial, exotic breeds. We're not going to participate in that anymore. We're going to choose biodiversity at the genetic and the species levels to actually restore these, recuperate these landscapes. And at the same time, we're starting to do outreach to original owners to understand better how we can decolonize our practices and this land to make it actually available for sovereign practice here. I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's the beginning of a journey we're on.
And that's not Murray Pryor and his family at Yass, Guru Farm there.
We know each other online.
Yeah, he's initiated, I guess is maybe the right word, an understanding. I'm not sure sort of if it's an agreement, but certainly an understanding, an acknowledgement of the need to share. And even using the word share is kind of weird, because it's like, Murray is he's the custodian, he's the steward, he's legally the owner, as it were, but, go back so many hundreds of years, and how did that even happen? So an acknowledgement that this landscape is, and some would argue should be, because that feels like the right thing to do and an appropriate thing to do, is for that to be understood to be shared with, Indigenous people who would normally, whatever normal would have been farming, essentially, living and producing food in that landscape. So what Murray's done is, with an elder in his area, Paul House, an understanding that there will be a part of his land, Murray's farm, that we put aside for Paul and his mob to utilise.
I heard that Millpost are doing something similar, where they've opened their property to being able to do like ritual and celebration.
Millpost, who's that?
Up near you. Am I calling it the wrong thing?
I don't know.
I'm sure it was Millpost.
I'll put it in the show notes. We'll take this offline.
Yeah, Penny Cothy can tell us.
Okay.
Who it was, because she's the one who told me about it.
So I think to that point, this is, and thankfully, becoming more of a thing. And we're thinking at Hanamino, like, how do we not necessarily emulate the same thing, but I mean, it may well be the same thing. I don't know. And I'm really looking forward to meeting Paul, because we are in the same, same part of the world, same region there. How can we just be more considerate? How can we share? How can we collaborate? How can we, what are the mutually beneficial, arrangements, understandings that we can establish?
Yeah.
So that this is becoming more of a normal thing,
Yeah, I think it's like there's an awakening at the moment. Totally. And I feel like there's the start of a movement, and I don't think any of us know what it looks like yet. But there are attempts. There's an opening of a conversation that wasn't there before.
And it's through people like Bruce Pascoe, who and many others that, through what he's written, that's powerful stuff. And just the man that he is, he's just a wonderful. And I love the fact that he, as you said, there are white people and there are black people, and both are going nowhere. So what are we going to do? And there's not
the pragmatism.
Totally, it's like, what, we can actually make this work.
Yeah.
What happened in the past is what happened in the past, and there's mending and mending to be done there. But that doesn't mean we just can't think about the future and making that a beautiful and better and a collaborative approach to, putting the culture, the Indigenous culture back.
Somebody else I'd
culture.
recommend, if you've probably already read him, but Tyson Yunkaporta's Sand Talk.
Haven't read it. Yeah, it's on the list.
It's the best thing I've read in years and years and years. Okay. Like, it's really, I think every single page of my copy is marked up.
Yeah.
And
what colour fluoro do you use?
And no, I usually use a pencil.
Pencil, okay, cool. Rub it down.
Not always. Sometimes a pen, but black if I do. But his writing really helped me think about the ways that, as a young hippie, I started trying to think of ways being more in tune with nature. But I had no genealogy of that. I had no family history of it that I knew of. I'm sure it existed because my dad was from poor farmers in the South, so it existed, but we were cut off from it. And so reading his book helped me think about how we can engage more with Indigenous ways of knowing and being in the world without appropriating that, and how to have a kind of convergence in our ways of knowing by listening better to other ways of knowing, but also of listening to land. And it's really struck me that we're at nearly 10 years here at Jonai, and it's now with 10 years of walking this land that we both feel that we understand it. It speaks to us in ways that in the early years we couldn't hear it.
I mean, I guess you're probably more ready now. There might be there was that honeymoon, there was the urgency, there was the imprinting. It's the not imposing, but just like, this is, totally understand. And now it's like, okay, you're ready.
We're ready.
And that's like, I mean, I guess everyone's journey is different, of course, and some people never get to that point, and that's okay too. And then some people are on point straight away, But again, there's really no right or wrong. Talking about appropriation, Hamish Mackay, our biodynamic educator, it's one of my wonderful mentors. He talks about I'm talking about the whiteys, we Anglos, Europeans took the land. That was a physical thing, and that was a horrible thing, and a lot of work to do there. And he also, I guess, warns is probably not the right word, but he talks about the stealing of the culture, and this is what I don't understand, and I feel a real need to try and understand it and step into this very tentatively. Is what is, as whiteys become more aware and acknowledge and conscious of the history and the opportunity for the future, is that we don't become the ones calling the shots, and we don't,
Totally. Yeah. That's actually, I think, the biggest danger. You saw it with the Indigenous foods movement back in the 70s in this country, that was mostly led by white people wanting to grow Indigenous foods.
Commercialise, yeah.
And again, the resurgence of it in the last decade has gone exactly down the same path, where it's predominantly white people who are starting Indigenous food companies. I think I read a stat that it's something like only 2% Indigenous-owned Indigenous foods companies in this country, and I think the awareness of that problem is increasing, but it has to increase more quickly. in the global stuff that I work in with the food sovereignty movement, there's a lot of advocacy around free, prior and informed consent. And that's like, so if you want to grow some of the local mernong from here, you would need to get consent from, if you were going to commercialize it. And then if you did get the consent, you would need to also share the benefits of you commercializing it. And we argue this point with big companies, like with the corporations of the world, because they're always stealing indigenous and traditional knowledges and commercializing them and making bucket loads of money. And they don't share the benefits very well at all, even though there are multiple international treaties that say they have to. And it was only probably in the more recent years that I fully appreciated how much that needs to apply here at the local level. It's not just corporations. It's you and me as non-Indigenous Australians. We need to actually also be getting consent and then sharing benefits.
And we'd be mad not to, wouldn't we? I mean, because it's the Indigenous cultures who, the cultivation, the propagation, the nurturing and that's their culture. So we would be mad not to go, hey guys, we don't know much about this. We want to bring this together, whether it's about asking permission or, that sort of, not so much formality of it, but, it'd be silly just to think we knew it all anyway and go, oh, we just need a few of those bloody yams.
Well,
and a bit of
especially
seed
since we're usually wrong.
That's right. That's where we hit just us being dickheads,
Yeah, I think so we decided last year that one of the ways, even though we don't grow any Indigenous crops commercially here, or animals, we decided that a way that we could share the benefits of the fact that we literally hold title when the local mob here can't. We started paying the rent. And so in our case, we pay it to the Pay the Rent organization, which is based here in Victoria. And they, an Indigenous board decides how that money will be spent for Indigenous projects. And
locally?
In Victoria specifically, in this case, but so other people are paying the rent to their local Aboriginal land councils or corporations.
So when you say paying the rent, so landholders?
So 1% of our income now pays the rent.
Yeah, right. And that goes back to this organisation that then...
In our case, this organisation, and they get to decide how it's spent because it's not our business.
Yeah, cool. And there's a website?
It's literally paytherent.org. Yeah, cool. But they say if you're not in Victoria or if you are but you want to pay the local mob, then go to your local Aboriginal corporation or land council or other organisations and ask how can you start paying the rent.
Yeah, cool. I haven't even heard that.
Imagine if all of us paid 1% of our income. Like you would actually start to pay some decent restitution then. And
then if that money was being, divided, divvied up into some projects and, whether it's basic housing or whatever, because, there's lots of, I guess, government funds that have just not been utilised at all well. You wouldn't want that to sort of be repeated, but I guess this is by the very fact that it's been put together. Whose initiative is it? Who is it?
The one in Victoria, Pay the Rent, has come from a bunch of local Indigenous activists. So people like Gary Foley are involved, and so very prominent Indigenous elders are the ones leading that. And then, and obviously there might be disagreements amongst various groups about how it gets spent, but for me what's important is that it's not actually up to me at all.
The contributions
it's entirely up to the Indigenous mob to make up their own minds how they want to spend that money.
Yeah. I want to talk about which one? Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. Let's go there. I know you get banged on the head about that all the time, but I think one of the in a good way, but it's one of, I guess, you're known very, very much for your advocacy work there. And you mentioned before about your I guess, I don't know if it's a role, ongoing thing, but your contribution to the UN discussions that are coming up. Can you talk about that? Is that secret?
No, it's not at all. In fact, I think we shared it on Facebook. So right now there's a process underway for what's called the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and that's being led by a UN organization called the Convention on Biological Diversity. That convention, the CBD, has a long history of advocating for biodiversity, like 30, 40 years, and only probably in the last 10 has their attention started to turn towards agriculture. because historically, people think about biodiversity as being outside agriculture. And now the new biodiversity framework has several targets that include mention of agriculture. We think they're not doing a very good job of going far enough about pushing for really good agriculture. The framework is setting targets for less bad agriculture. And we're like, if this is the global biodiversity framework and we are losing biodiversity at such extraordinary rates, we eat something like 9 crops are 80% of our diet. 66% of the global diet is from 9 crops. It's shameful. And in Australia, the biodiversity conversation still sits outside of agriculture usually. So they'll talk about increasing biodiversity on your farm of things that have nothing to do with the farm produce. But there's no discussion yet of increasing the biodiversity of the crops and the plants. It's only the like ancillary biodiversity. And so this framework was meant to be determined in Kunming in 2020, but of course we couldn't go to Kunming. So it's been extended, and now we're getting towards the pointy end. It's meant to be in Kunming in October this year, if that's a thing. Will probably happen on online. But the meeting on Tuesday, it's not a meeting, it's a stakeholder open webinar. So because normally when you go to these huge UN fora and you've got like 500 delegates, there will be side events, and that will be hosted largely by civil society like us, and we might show, or private sector as well, and they might show what they care about in terms of what needs to change. And the negotiators who are there to negotiate the framework, they'll come along to those to keep gathering information. Those can't happen because we're not meeting in person. And also the informal corridor conversations can't happen. So what they've done as the, not perfect solution, but something, is these stakeholder forums. So what they have are 5 of us speaking on Tuesday night. If you're in Rome, it's the morning, but for us, it's 10 to 12 Tuesday night. And there are 2 experts. One is one of the co-chairs of something called EPBES, which is the International Panel of Biodiversity in Ecosystems. And the other one is from UNESCO. And then there are the 3 non-state stakeholders, if you like. And there's me speaking for the smallholders of the world.
Cool.
There's Esther from the Asian Farmers Association, which is a big farmers and small farmers. It's a big NGO for small farmers.
Yeah.
And the third one is Danone, one of the guys from, the yogurt guys, one of the biggest dairy companies in the world, speaking for the private sector. And
how's that going to go?
Because that's what they do. They give the private sector the same standing as the people. So corporations get this incredible voice in these spaces. It's awful. And so my role is to speak to the importance of biodiversity in sustainable agricultural and food systems.
Which I imagine would be, almost directly at loggerheads with the discussions that Danone would want to be would be having, because I guess
but the last few years
they're even thinking about like these pesky small farmers. What do they know? And they're just disturbing our corporatization, industrialization of
but now they've got language for it. Even CropLife, one of the biggest plant breeding companies in the world, has a whole web page on agroecology. And they talk about how biotechnology fits into that, which it 100% doesn't. So Danone comes in, and in our preparatory meeting last week, the guy who will be speaking alongside me, who's higher up in Danone, sent his minions, I guess, to gather the information. And one of them she took up most of the talking time of our preparatory meeting to ensure that he would be able to speak directly to the other stakeholders and speak whenever he wanted and answer all the questions that he wanted. And she was very friendly about it, but it was like, come on.
She?
And this was somebody speaking for him, yep. And then she said, anyway, I think...
he didn't even attend the preparatory
He didn't even attend. He just sent note takers, 2 of them, in fact, for a meeting with 10 people. Danone was 1/5 of the participants. And the other thing she said was, but of course what we want to make clear is that farmers already know that biodiversity is terribly important to them. It's the crux of everything they do. They're very reliant. We need to be very specific about how important biodiversity is. And she just kind of repeated that for about a minute's kind of generalizing. And then the chair looked to me and he said, so, and Tammi, what does IPC, with the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, which APS is a member of, what does the IPC, hope to talk about? And I said, I really agree that we should be talking specificity in biodiversity. So I'd like to share some examples from our farm and some of my comrades from Mexico and Guatemala, and how we actually support microbial life through things like biofertilizers and bone char, and how we then have breed diversity in rare breed livestock and indigenous breeds in Guatemala, and how we nutrient cycle on farm, and how we control value chains here so that nutrient also isn't lost and then gets returned to the farm. So I'd like to be very specific about how important biodiversity is to us, and how also for peasants and indigenous peoples, biodiversity is not separate from us. We're part of it. We're part of the ecosystems we inhabit. And it's not important only for commercial concerns. It's important because nature is inherently important, and we're a part of that, and we're here to be custodians of that, from the land to the air and everything in between. So I'd like to talk about that, if that's all right. And they were like, by this point, the Denon lady her nose was nearly on her screen.
Well, write a reply. Yeah. And also biodiversity is not just the plant and animal and microbial, it's the human element, it's bio-life and the diversity of that, which essentially is the number of people involved in an activity or in an industry or in agriculture. Because I imagine Danone, dairy, God knows what else, big factories, not many farmers, lots of cows, diversity of, so they're all probably Frisians. I'm just generalising, but in terms of, they're not looking at diversity of breed.
No.
They want this much protein, this is the milk fat, this goes into a plastic container, and this is the very non-diverse range of products that we actually produce. So, they're not talking, I mean, again, their definition of biodiversity.
They're having a different conversation.
They are having an absolute different conversation.
And to your point about the human diversity, it doesn't include people at all. Their systems are all about employing as few people as possible, so it's cheaper.
Let's get some automated
Whereas ours are all about employing more. Agroecology
Yeah.
values labour over capital explicitly. We keep 4 people fully employed here on this tiny little farm.
Yeah. And agriculture, I mean, half the word is culture. What is culture without the people element in it?
Yeah. And also my Indigenous comrades from around the world will talk about the importance of culture and ritual in the maintenance of your care for Mother Nature, and that is completely devoid in industrial systems. They're not going to talk about nature. And they're certainly not going to talk about culture or ritual.
So that's coming. That's Tuesday. This won't go out before then, so we're not going to spoil anything for our Danone, whatever they're called.
I don't think they're watching me that closely.
Oh, I don't know. Well, who's that person over there in the trees?
Oh,
it's Danone. Danone is so on the case. Hang on. What's it saying there? Micro SD card has limited space remaining. Rightio. We've got 15 minutes. Let's not get to the... And thank you... Can we not get to that bit? Tell me about... what are you irate about at the moment? Or maybe you've already you might just told us. What are you irate about?
I reckon I'm mostly irate at government. That's not new.
No shit. Really?
But it's becoming better informed. I'm doing an awful lot of reading about the history of states and governance. I read this incredible book called Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott. His book after that is The Art of Not Being Governed, and the one after that is 3 Cheers to Anarchism. So I'm on that path, and I think I've gone from describing myself as a social anarchist to just straight up anarchist, because I think that states are inherently unable to govern us effectively unless they devolve control to communities. And I don't want the eradication of all states, but I want them to be localized, because the amount of misspending in government and the inability to listen to people's and communities' concerns is extraordinary because of the high levels all our governments work at instead of with the people. But even here locally at my council, and I hope they do listen, because I'm quite angry with them at the moment, of misspending, like what I see as a misunderstanding of what they could do with this artisanal agriculture project we have here in Hepburn, and just not listening to farmers saying, you know what we need, we've told them for years, we need infrastructure and we need support and collaborations. We need infrastructure. And we need support for collaborations. And we also need reduced regulatory barriers, regulations that were written for industrial systems that don't apply properly to the scale of operation that we are, where we also have extremely high levels of transparency and traceability in our products. We need something totally different. This regulatory regime is not fit for purpose. And I'm really tired of them getting excited about that and then going, oh, it's so hard though.
We can't do that.
Yeah.
Has your approach to going the regulators and government changed? Have you changed your approach? I think you just really mentioned it then, from a social anarchist to an anarchist. Are you changing tact and finding that change is more effective? Is there any sort of a...
It probably changed during our big campaign, AFSA's big campaign in Victoria from 2016 to 18, where we won the planning reforms for pastured pig and poultry. And we started out by just hammering them for everything they were doing wrong, which got their attention. It was great. We got lots of meetings out of that, but they didn't like us. But then we worked out, because they were talking about changing some legislation, we formed the Legal Defence Fund and we started writing legislation for them. Yeah. So if we try to speak productively with government and they don't listen, I'm still all about the stick. However, if they are listening and actively trying to help, but they just don't have the tool set, then we're here to bring the tools. Yeah. And we bring a carrot. And we thank them publicly for their good work of trying to listen. And I think the best successes we've had have been literally writing legislation for them. They love it when you come in with what they need to
and actually helping them get the job done, do without them, taking backward steps or, being bashed, but going, okay, that's actually quite useful.
Exactly. So we find a lot of legal examples from overseas where things are being done differently. Small scale abattoirs, for an example, in the UK, they've just went through a parliamentary inquiry that recommended that for micro abattoirs on farms, rather than classifying them as abattoirs, you classify them under rural industry, because you don't see it as a changed land use. It's all in keeping. Yeah. So long as it's not more than 1,000 kills a year, it's a rural industry that doesn't need to be treated separately like an industrial abattoir that has bee doubles coming in with thousands of animals. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's a clever bit of legislation, isn't it? So you change the planning scheme.
The precedent's been already made.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've already taken that one to the Ag Minister in Victoria, and she was pretty interested.
Make it easy for them.
Yeah.
What are you excited about?
Everything. Come on. Sunflowers. Have you seen them? I'm excited about milking Clarabelle every morning and evening. I'm excited about learning to make cheese. I'm excited that the Food Sovereignty Alliance has a wonderful committee and they're all pulling in the same direction, and all these smart food sovereignty warriors just getting better at what they do. I'm excited about the next book that we're working on. I'm excited about my PhD. I'm excited that you came today.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah. And I'm excited that we're having dinner, and I'm excited that you've given me a bed tonight, because I totally missed that part in my planning, that my travel plans changed. And Darren asked me, Darren Doherty, who I interviewed this morning, sitting in Castlemaine. Now it's Castlemaine, not Castlemaine. He beat that into me quick smart. And he said, "What are you doing? So what are you doing tonight? What are you doing?" And I'm thinking, I'm going over to Dalesford, and then then it occurred to me that I had nowhere to stay. So I'm happy about that, and I'm so grateful.
You're very lucky that we just cleaned. That bedroom was more pantry than bedroom, and now it's just those beautiful jars that you saw on the shelf.
Yeah,
it was full of all of our cheeses curing as well.
I would probably smell worse than those cheeses, don't worry. Not that cheese smells bad, but in terms of, you don't need your beacon cheese the whole time, do you? Now, what else have I got here? Books. Tell me about books. Are there any sort of go-to books that you have? You just go,
Seeing Like a State, I'd recommend for anyone who wants to. Seeing Like a State, for anyone who's trying to understand governance and why states are getting it so wrong. Our book that we put out in 2019, Farming Democracy, Radically Transforming the Food System from the Ground Up, which tells the story of 8 farmers doing like we do.
And you were so transparent in that one.
It has all of the finances of the farms, everything, and the ups and downs, what people like and don't like. Yeah, it's a very that was the requirement of the book, and everyone came through with the goods. It's so good. Yeah.
And you know what, before you go on there, that to me is a great example of this kind of farming, this type of philosophy and the collaborative approach in, and I'm using the broad term regenerative farming, the people involved I've found, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, are that kind of people. Transparent,
totally
collaborative, sharing and just wanting to help,
Yeah, and
there's that lack of
how we often get called a niche, like we're looking for a niche market. And what I find is that the people who are in here like me doing this work are trying to make this, the famous COVID words, right? They're trying to make this a new normal, not a niche. And the new normal is about transparency because that's what's going to give us the radical transformation we need. Everything about the hidden food system is bad. And everything about the transparent one, if it's bad, you'll be able to tell them and they have to fix it.
It won't be bad for long.
Yep. We keep just improving. So yeah, I think you're right. It's exciting time to be alive when you see the changes in people's mindset and attitude and willingness to be open. I find that wonderful and generous of people.
More book.
Agroecology by Peter Rossett and Miguel Altieri, which is just like a very short volume that gives you the science, the set of practices, and the social movement that is agroecology. So if you're wanting a quick dip, and it's available online as a PDF, actually, so you don't even have to buy the hard copy. What else would I recommend? I mean, I've read about a million books.
What about mentors? Who are some of your mentors you just want to tip your hat off to?
Well, I mean, obviously, Charlie Massey, for me, is a major mentor just with his commitment and hard work. He's just, and his generosity. Tyson Yunkaporta, who I mentioned before, I'm finding has become somebody that I'm staying in contact with since I had a conversation with him for one of AFSA's solidarity sessions. So I'm finding him somebody really rich to think with. And then, but for me, my mentors are all of my fellow farmers. That's again a pillar of agroecology, farmer to farmer knowledge sharing. It's being able to just talk to, whether it's the farmer next door or 5 Ks away or 5,000 Ks away, online or on the phone, and just share what's going on with each of us. How did you do that? How did you overcome this? What are you seeing in the paddocks right now? What do you need? What's not working? My mentors are my peers.
A lot of power in that, and power may be the wrong word, but that just getting back to, I guess, back to the government regulation and the power they wield, or may not. Well, the changing sort of balance of that is that top-down approach is just not working, is it?
It's not. And again, if you read Agroecology by Peter Rossett and Miguel Altieri, they'll talk about that it needs to be a bottom-up approach. Any of the changes that we're trying to see now need to come from all of us. We need to stop this nonsensical reliance on so-called experts who we pay a fortune to, for whether it's for inputs or knowledge. We need to stop doing that. We need to rely on ourselves. We need to reskill ourselves. So if you need biofertilizer, learn how to make it. If you need to read your landscape, walk it more often. Yeah. And sure, pull in experts periodically who do already know something you need to know. Podcasts are fabulous for that, I find. But don't make that your model of learning and being in the world.
Not being prescriptive about that.
Yeah.
Any sort of exciting projects on the go?
Well, here on the farm, of course, we're just finishing the ladder for all of our preserves and the greenhouse for winter. And then we hope to build an abattoir on the farm in the next year or two. Cool. So we've started design work on that, and we've all signed up to get our meat inspector licenses. So we're raring to go. I've signed up 10 of us here in the region to do our licenses.
So that means with that license, you can have your own farm abattoir
and inspect for ourselves.
Inspect for yourselves, and having 10 to do that means that you can just rotate.
Totally, and they could inspect for themselves, and we don't even have to be there. So that's very exciting. So other farmers can use it as well. That's the idea. Imagine there was a micro abattoir every 20 Ks to service the little farmers.
Well, there used to be.
So I know. So bring it back. So I'm excited about that.
That's a big step forward, isn't it?
And I'm excited about AFSA's local food economies campaign, which we're just in the grinding work of right now, where we're identifying regulatory barriers for every state in Australia.
Who's that?
The Food Sovereignty Alliance. Yep. So we're currently mapping those regulatory barriers and then starting to find examples of legislation we could write to give the options to the legislators of how this could look.
Make it easy. Mm-hmm. Okay, billboard. You've got the opportunity to write something, a question, statement, phrase, whatever, quote, on a billboard on the Hume Highway. A lot of people driving past. what would you put on it?
That's really hard. I mean, you know, my thing for ages has been you are what you eat, so eat ethically, which is kind of cute, but it's not nearly as deep as what I'd say these days. I don't know. It might be don't eat chicken unless its name was Colin.
Okay. That'll do.
That'll get them thinking.
That will get them thinking. Well, Tammi, can I just say with 3 minutes spare, or probably 2 now, you've got me thinking, and I trust you've got my listeners thinking as well. And can I just thank you so much for your time today, for the wisdom that you're sharing, and not just what you're sharing with me now and therefore with our listeners, but also, I mean, you don't have to do what you're doing. Like, you could sit on your farm and do your thing and, you know, be a Meatsmith and have a business and have a family and doing all those things. So the fact that you are stepping outside of that, literally, and your advocacy work in the space of food, you know, with food systems, and just even this, you know, talk about, you know, making other, you know, the micro abattoir world, you know, opening that up, you know. So I'm, you know, very grateful that you and people like you are in the world contributing in such a positive way. So can you
thank my parents?
Hey?
Thank my parents for it.
Yeah, wonderful. And can you don't stop doing that, please? Can you keep doing it?
I can't help myself.
Can you rest
anyway.
every now and again a bit? Are you getting enough rest?
Plenty, yes. Thanks so much, Charlie. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
And your Belvedere. It's
Yes.
not a gazebo. Don't anyone think it's a gazebo.
Definitely not a gazebo.
And thank you, Stuart, for building the gazebo. And yeah, Tammi, thank you for your time. And Stuart, thank you for giving me the time with Tammi.
Thanks.
I think you were supposed to be milking a cow, weren't you?
I was meant to be milking a cow and finishing preparation for a workshop.
And he said he didn't come. He just went, right, no, I'm up, I'm doing it.
You did.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Tammi.
Thank you.
Next week, I'll be interviewing Stuart Austin. I've known Stuart for some years now, and he's a fantastic regenerative farmer at Ebor in New South Wales. We had fantastic chats, as we all always do. But he's got some really insightful stories to tell, and good yarns about his own regenerative journey, which I hope you enjoy as much as I did. Next week, Stuart Austin, The Regenerative Journey.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.